What if you could understand your true power in the context of your legacy? I have the pleasure to introduce you to Melanie Tonia Evans. She is a global narcissistic abuse recovery expert, creator of the Quanta Freedom Healing Method and the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Program, known as NARP. Melanie's leading edge healing method has helped thousands of people make astounding recoveries from trauma. Her work has touched over 15 million people all around the world in 150 countries, revolutionizing the survivor model to one of thriver status. Welcome, Melanie.
Hi, Angelina. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for accepting the invitation. I know that you're on the other side of the world, as they say, in the land down under called Australia.
Yes, absolutely am. In the jungle here, it's amazing.
Yeah. So let's kick it off. And what is narcissistic abuse? And then we're going to get into some of the remedies, but let's go to the problem first, because some people
Mm,
might know about it and some people it's a brand new phenomenon.
yeah, sure. And it's important to understand because the word narcissism is thrown around a lot. And a lot of people just think a narcissistic person is somebody who's egotistical and they're full of themselves, but it's a much deeper issue than that. And what it is, it's a person who is putting on a persona. They have a false self. And the reason they have a false self is because they have such a damaged inner core that is so full of shame. And they've disowned that. They've detached from that. They're not living life through that because they believe it's unacceptable and they can't get their needs met. So they created a fictitious character, which is a grandiose self, which is ego, which they're running their life through. So what that means is they're continually needing to hold the ego, the false self up. And when that doesn't work, then they will lash out, they will attack, they'll get bent out of shape, they'll get triggered easily, they'll blame you, they don't take responsibility. They are, and you end up with a person in your life who you thought was wonderful, who literally becomes your worst nightmare.
Yeah. So, in the context of legacy, one of the reasons why I wanted you to speak is because I've known your work for
Mm,
the last 5 or 10 years, as I mentioned in our preamble. And I just
yeah,
think of the people that could be creating a legacy right now that can't because they are either they're in a relationship with a narcissist and they don't even realize it, whether it's a personal relationship, a business
true.
relationship, court issues, or even just that they have some type of what I might call like a quantum connection with someone in their past where they haven't quite cut that cord. So I
Yep.
thought it would be brilliant because you kind of know some of the signs. So what are some of those signs if somebody finds themselves in a relationship
Mm.
with an NPD or a narcissist?
Yeah, and that's so true, Angelina, because there's a lot of people with incredible gifts and contributions for the world, great lights to shine, and they can't because they've got a narcissistic individual in their life. And a lot of people that are here for amazing things are being real, they're handing their power away to a narcissistic person who is pathologically jealous, who is sabotaging them, who's not letting them be themselves. And ironically, the narcissist came in pretending to adore this shining light and this capable person who had these incredible gifts and contributions. But then the narcissist was there never to be a partner in their life, was there to steal their life and steal their life force and cannot stand somebody else being the center of attention. So, how do we know? Well, the really the signs of a narcissist is that when they step on your toes and you say ouch, when they do the wrong thing, and they do, because they can be selfish, entitled, childish, inappropriately angry, um, defensive, stonewall you, and when you bring it up, you will start to see the narcissistic defense mechanisms. So, and what happens is you end up in reactive abuse because you say, hang on, this isn't okay. And then what that person will do is stonewall you, shut you down, invalidate you, tell you you're making it up, you've got it wrong, they didn't do anything wrong. They'll project onto you. They'll bring up something that you did that doesn't even have anything to do with that. They'll blame you. They'll make excuses and justifications and all. And you feel like your head is spinning. So, what's happened is you've stepped into this reality of somebody who is got defenses. You see, because the narcissist approach, don't tell me there's something wrong with me. And even if you talk about a situation that they equate to themselves, you will start doing these insane defense mechanisms rather than an adult who can just have a conversation with you. And then what happens is you jump in and try to hang on a minute. You try to bring it back to reality. It gets more insane, more abusive. You react because anybody would, because they get personal with low blows, and they also pick your weak spot and go for it to trigger you. They trigger you and they want to. You react, you cry, you yell, and then they say, look at you. You're a nutcase.
Yeah.
You're insecure. You've got issues. You're oversensitive. You imagine all this stuff in your head, and it's devastating. That's one of the biggest signs that you're dealing with a narcissist, is that behavior, because they all do it.
Yeah, I think the term for it is gaslighting. And I think one of the things that's so surprising
Absolutely.
is sometimes people think, well, if they have a certain amount of education or if they have a certain amount of titles, and I know some individuals have come to you and they're like world leaders, they're very prominent, they're very established, and they will say, Melanie, I've just been blindsided and I didn't even see that coming.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I just wanted to add that it's interesting because the more that somebody fights a narcissist, the more that it's like pouring gasoline onto a fire.
100%. You're actually setting yourself for you're setting yourself up for mental and soul abuse, trying to create sanity with a narcissist, trying to get them to get the details and act like a normal human being. It's like going in with a crocodile and getting it to fetch a ball and come on a walk with you on a lead. You're going to get ripped to shreds. And it is the same with these people.
Yeah, I just find it so amazing how I call it like life skills or survival skills, and how much it wasn't covered when we were growing up. And I think oftentimes when we venture forth in our career,
Right.
we're going to be tested many times. Sometimes it's a trial by fire. Sometimes it is just brand new situations that we have to clean up something that we didn't even know could be a wound within us. That like you had said,
Yeah.
they can find a weak spot, and we could be busy defining, developing, and executing our legacy. They come out sideswipe in our car, and we say, wow, where did that come from? And now we get to
Yeah.
deal with a nightmare, whether that nightmare could be a month or a decade. And I know you've shared in your own personal story, you went through it twice and
Yes.
had to learn
Yes.
lessons, and you're wondering, like, did I sign up for this soul contract? And we're going to talk quantum and woo woo in a little bit, but it's
Oh, I
almost
love that.
yeah,
Good.
yeah, right, the
Good.
subconscious, the superconscious. But I think there's this question of, like, what did I do to deserve this?
Yeah. And the thing is, the narcissist doesn't just sideswipe your car, they blame you for them doing it.
Yeah,
Which is even
absolutely.
crazier.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I find that education around the subject really important, because I see people who don't know are just bait.
Mm,
It's like, and they have to almost get an education around this subject, because
big time.
and I'm going to ask you also in the latter part of this interview what you would like your
Mm,
holistic legacy to be. But if somebody can't get
yes.
out of
Yes.
the claws or the clutches of a
Mm,
narcissist, there's like no chance of them even being able to complete their legacy, which somebody might call a soul purpose or a soul contract. It's like this test comes along, and the test, either somebody finds a way through it, or that thing can take them down, and they, whew.
that's exactly right. And Angelina, their soul isn't going to even survive staying connected to it.
Yeah.
Unless they completely detach, numb out, and just go along to get along and take the pounding. And a lot of people do that for decades and then eventually And often, usually, they're even discarded too, because really at that bigger level picture, their soul's not meant to be living this.
Ooh, I didn't even know or think about that one. Interesting.
Mm,
So
mm,
I can only imagine that, if somebody, they must think in the back of their mind, did I sign up for this? Because oftentimes when it happens, and we're going to talk in a moment about the next best steps and what they can do proactively, but sometimes in society, people just go into what I call victim blaming. And they could say to the person who's being attacked, number one, oh, I'm so glad it's not me. But number two, they could say, I bet that person
mm.
deserved it.
Yeah, look, there's a fine line between this. I just want to, first of all, that thing about how you said that people are educated, and we even get psychologists and all sorts of people that are really, really smart people. The whole thing about narcissistic abuse, it's the smart, strong people that actually get damaged the most, because the more you're in your head and the more you're in knowledge and information, the more you're going to try and lecture and prescribe, and the stronger and more capable you are in life that I can make anything in my life work and I can survive it. You are a classic example of somebody who's going to be narcissistically abused. People who are less so-called intelligent, who are more in their feeling center, and who could honestly say, I just can't stand how this makes me feel, they are much more likely to get up and get away. And also, too, the people who are less connected to stuff, like my image or my house, or the kids have got to go to this private school or whatever, the people who just say, my soul is so much more important than any of that stuff, they can more easily let go and walk away. A lot of people can have the impression like it's really weak, unintelligent people who get taken down by narcissists. It's actually the complete opposite.
Oh, that's a great insight. That's a very powerful insight. And I wonder if it's like with vampires, they always make the joke like don't let them in. And I almost wonder if it's like
Oh,
may-
yes.
what's that? What's that?
Oh, yes, yes. The vampire myth, so much of it is about narcissism. It's fascinating.
Interesting. Do you mean in terms of psychic vampires? And we're just freestyling this moment, but
I love this freestyle. Okay, so the myth of vampire is, well, first of all, you're absolutely 100% right. The vampire would knock on the door, and that vampire could not come in and infiltrate your soul unless you gave it permission. So this is the thing. The narcissist is a Trojan horse. And the reason why they get into our life is because we are feeling we don't take our time. They're a predator that will hit an injured gazelle. People don't like that, but it's the truth. The predator will take down what it can take down very quickly. So the great analogy of that is Don Miguel Ruiz wrote in Mastery of Love, the pizza story. So there's a guy and he knocks on the door with this delicious, greasy pizza. Two women. The first woman, she doesn't cook for herself. She's starving. He says, I'm going to bring you free greasy pizza, beautiful pizza, every day if you accept me with it. And she was starving, so she took the offer. The second lady knocks on the door. She's got a beautiful, nutritious kitchen. She cooks organic, amazing food for herself every day. He knocks on the door with the offer and she says, are you kidding? Why would I take an offer like that? Shut the door in his face. So what narcissists do when they come into our life, whether it be business, friendship, I mean, if you're in a family with one, that's a different scenario. You're born into it. A whole other story journey we could talk about. But let's say you meet one, business, friend, love relationship. The narcissist is a totally honed predator. They're looking for your weak spot. They look for what you've got missing in your life or what you haven't healed yet. And they position themselves as the salvation, the greasy pizza, because you're hungry. And what they do is they enmesh and bond with you very quickly. So the Trojan horse says, I bear all of these gifts inside of me. You open the gates, which means you give them access to your heart, your body, your bed, your finances, your business. You open the gate, you let them in, the gate shuts, and then what opens out of this Pindara, this Trojan horse, is not what you thought it was. And by then, they're in the gates. It's too late.
Yeah. And what's so interesting about, and I know we're referencing the metaphor of a vampire, but in this scenario, we could almost call that narcissist a psychic vampire because they can suck that person dry.
Oh, look, totally. And it's exact. And here we go to the next metaphor. The metaphor of a vampire is they are the walking dead. There's no life force. They have to suck human blood to survive. The narcissist killed off their true self, divorced it. They're not connected to source, life force, well-being, creation, expansion, the light. They're not connected to a higher power. They believe they're God. They're disconnected. They have no source life force. They're like an AI, right? And this disconnection from God, who states it's God, a false prophet, actually needs to feed off human life force and energy to exist. So the only reason that they are in your life is to suck your life force, your resources, your energy, your stuff, your contacts. It's all you are only an object to feed the true master, the bottomless black pit of the false self, the vampire. You're there to feed it.
Yeah, and what's so interesting is a lot of times people think when they look at a narcissist on the outside, wow, that person, it appears they have it all together. And yet, upon closer look, and maybe this is a very adult conversation because it takes a little bit of maturity, upon closer look, we can actually see a very empty soul. And that therefore that's where that arrogance comes from, because if their soul was filled with love, they wouldn't need to uh, destroy somebody else's life in a scarcity mindset of us versus them, or a win-lose type of dynamic.
And it's actually very easy to flush out, when we start healing and we show up as a true self in integrity, filled with light, knowing source has our back, and we are all we can. We don't need a particular person to be exactly what we want them to be to have our life. So what happens is, if we get a trigger or an intuition, look, I'll just give you a really awesome example. Years ago, when I knew this stuff before I met my wonderful partner, who's not a narcissist, I'd been on a date with a guy 3 times. No way am I going to his house or my house, because I know the stuff. I'm still casing him out. He talked about his work. Everything looked wonderful on paper. We were getting along great, Anyway, 3rd date, we're out to dinner. He started talking about his work colleagues in just a snarky way, really superior, nasty way. And I felt it in my gut. I've gone to the bathroom, come back, and he said to me, "How's our 3rd date going?" And I showed up honestly. I said, "Actually, the way that you spoke about your work colleagues, I found it really disparaging." I said the truth. He went from this, guy,
Facade.
ashen face. He got triggered into a narcissistic rage, hit the table. "How dare you speak to me like that? The date is over." And I'm like, whoa. So anyway, I've left the date. I am so excited. I am calling a girlfriend saying, "I just had the best date. This happened." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I'll tell you why." The old me would have gone to the bathroom, felt that, and I would have said, "Oh, look, he's so great. He's probably just having a moment. It's nothing." I would have gone back to the table. He would have said, "How's the 3rd date?" I would have been, "I think it's wonderful." And I would have just ignored it, not shown up. Okay. Because the narcissist is such a thin veneer. It's tissue paper thin, because it's not real. This false self is a construct of who they want to be. It's not who they are. So we feel it. All of us feel it. If we've got the confidence to show up without the fear of crap, if I'm myself and my truth, I'm no longer scared of you criticizing, rejecting, abandoning, or punishing me. I'm just going to be real. They are popped out every single time.
Yeah.
Now, here's the metaphor. Just one more thing. The vampire thing. The vampire, the big thing about the vampire, you shine a light on a vampire, They scream and shrivel and have to run back into the shadows. They can only be in your life if you diminish, dim down, and if you have the fear of being yourself. When you're
Yes.
the light of yourself, you will see them. They will show themselves every time.
Yes, brilliant. Thank you for sharing that story because it is spot on. And I think when people don't have that self-knowledge to say, I can listen
Yeah.
to the signals in my body, I think it's sometimes called like thin slicing, then people just say, I just want that other person to like me. And then they're that
Mm,
people pleaser because they're
mm.
so happy that someone has taken notice of them and seen their value because they haven't seen it yet,
Yes.
which is one of the reasons why I think this conversation is so appropriate because the number one
Oh,
thing that holds women back from designing a
mm.
legacy is self-worth. Somewhere deep inside of them
Absolutely.
is a belief that I don't deserve it. I'm, something in their upbringing that where there's an unresolved wound, or that they don't
Absolutely.
want to be that taller blade of grass in leadership development. So they might be an amazing business owner or leader when it
Mm.
comes to the niche of their business. But then if you say, well, why don't you take personal agency of your legacy? They could pull back and go, I don't know if I want to be that big. Let me shrink back and shirk back because what if I upset someone around me? They might not like that.
That's right. And then they're either going to criticize, reject, abandon, or punish me. And because I'm in the lack, that person, see, it's all about false idols. You know, if we're disconnected from source and sourcing directly through source, then we're trying to find our source outside of ourselves. The narcissist as a false self is a false source. And the narcissist is so attuned to working out what you need, the validation and what you need to feel whole, and love bombing, whether it be friendship, whether it be work, a business relationship, any relationship in your life, even a neighbor or a love partner, they will love bomb you by making you feel like a woman walking into a desert finding your oasis.
Yeah.
But
And that, but
it's an act.
yeah.
It's an act.
I'm so glad we're talking about this because some women will say, oh my gosh, I'm visible. I'm visible. Somebody finally noticed me. Somebody finally noticed my
Correct.
words. And they hand over their power. And it is like
Yep.
what you said before, it's handing it over to a crocodile. They get not just bit, but they could be, with the, what is the expression? It's like the person chewed me up and spit me out, which I think in narcissistic terminology is called the devalue and the discard, but they don't even know what happened
Correct.
to them. And they just want that reassurance again. And they come back, almost like
Yep.
a drug addict wanting more. And all the while, that
Absolutely.
person is destroying their
Absolutely.
legacy potential.
Uh-huh. And you're in a trauma bond of cortisol dopamine. So, this can happen very sexually with people with a narcissist, and especially too, if you've had a relationship in your life where you felt unmet, unseen, unheard, you're not important, you're overlooked, you're replaced, mum and dad were too busy or whatever. And then you have a narcissist come into your life who looks and sees and feels and meets you like no other. It feels like you've met your one and only. And then you get with this person, and it's the greatest dopamine rush and what is dopamine is relief. I'm home. The only way we can get home is through true source, not through a human being. So I'm home, I've arrived. Then that person starts devaluing you and pushing you back and detaching from you. So now you're in cortisol and adrenaline, which feels like I'm gonna die because my God, my savior has abandoned me. And then when they come back and when you reunite, you get the dopamine, you get the relief. So it's like you're running around with massive big stones in your shoes constantly. And then when you take them out, your feet have never felt better. It's Stockholm syndrome. And it's actually real because if you're with a destroyer who blindfolds you and you could be shot at any moment, they take the blindfold off, put the gun down, give you a beautiful meal, and they say, well, you're not going to die today. The relief is so massive, you feel like you're in love with them.
Well, and that's, yeah, and that's a brilliant point because sometimes then people psychologically they don't know whether they're coming or going, and the other person's running a game on them, and
Total a game, an
and
absolute game.
and if they're naive to the game, they don't even know what happened, and if they try and explain it to someone else, yeah, good luck with that because if that other party doesn't have that education, it's like what I described before. Many people in society can say, I'm just going to pull the hoodie over my head, keep walking, and say in the back of my mind, well, thank God that's not me. But I say, well, good luck, because the vampire could knock on your door if you get too big, if you upset the
Yeah.
status quo, if you
Yes.
rock the boat, if you disagree.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I just wanted to share a comment on something you said a moment ago. If that person feels like where they're coming home, it's almost like a false sense of safety, and then that other
Mm,
person
mm,
yanks
mm,
the rug out from underneath them, and it's not real
mm.
safety.
I've got to understand that feeling of coming home is relief because I didn't feel home. The narcissist is giving you that feeling of completion and wholeness that we haven't worked through our own unhealed stuff to get through true source ourselves. So we get back to the women with the pizza, right? So, and how do we know that we're not? Because it's our normal too. It was my normal not to feel whole and home when the narcissist came into my life. I just thought that periodic, depression and anxiety, I thought it was normal. Everybody had it. I was over functioning. I didn't feel home. I was always trying to find home outside of myself, and that was my normal. So I fell into it hook, line, and sinker, like most of us did. But if we, but the great thing is, after narcissistic abuse, you've either got to come home genuinely to true source, or you end up being broken. Like you're at this make or break time. Like everything that wasn't healed is so activated and ripped apart, all these old wounds fully up in your consciousness now to the point of personal catharsis. Life can no longer go on as normal with you having these wounds. Before the narcissist, you could. It was your normal and you kind of coped with it and you're in survival and you did what you did. And a lot of people were really good at overachieving to cover up how they really felt on the inside. I was one of them. Most of us are.
Woo!
But what happens with the narcissist is you no longer have your go-tos. You no longer have your overachieving. You no longer have your codependency of helping other people and being a beautiful person in society. And it's really real and you're really an empath, but you make it all about other people because you've never stopped to actually face those wounds inside of you where you feel like you're not enough to be loved. That's really what the wound is.
Yeah, I just want to share something that, and I'm going to go to home base for a moment, and then I'm going to ask you about best steps moving forward in terms of some of the
Sure.
remedies. I heard something the other day, and it had to do with the upbringing in the last so many decades, and the
Yeah.
comment that this gentleman made, named Max. He had said something along the lines of that back in the day, especially in cultures like Greece or Italy, a family would if they'd have children, and then they'd build a small side house, and their son or daughter would live there, and they would have like all the family members even on the street. But these days, society's been conditioned that, well, that adult is a burden after age 18, or children are viewed as only by their economic value. So when you talk
Okay.
about this idea of like self-love, if
Exactly.
there is an individual and all they've known is, well, you've got to go to the right school, have the right pedigree,
It's
have
been
the right
destroyed.
rewards, and then I mean
Yeah.
they are just fodder because their inner landscape has never been strengthened, because it's performance based, or what is called conditional love. And if they've had, and I'm not saying necessarily narcissistic parents, but parents that are going along with this idea, it very much breaks down the family unit. But it's almost like a keeping up with the Joneses of, well, if we don't want to have our child or adult offspring, if we don't want to accept them unconditionally, and their only value is economic value, again, they have to heal through that, but they're almost set up
100%.
from the get-go.
100%. Exactly. And you're right. It's happened in the last 20 or 30 years, and it's happening horrifically now, that your identity is everything. And what is our real identity? Like, if we really want to look at the 40,000 foot view, we are a fractal of source. We are made in the image and likeness of the one creator. And we are all at oneness in unity consciousness with that. That's the truth. But as soon as you are only lovable and worthy because of your identity or what you have or what degree you have or what you identify with, the more the breakdown of identity becomes, rather than we're all at one with source. You have separation consciousness. The further you get away from source, the more it hurts, the more you've lost yourself, the more your soul is cut off and it's out on the edge on its own, feeling empty, needy, and depressed and anxious, and quite frankly, traumatized. So that's where it's all gone. And you're right, the breakdown of the family, the breakdown of community, that top down singling out and pitting us all against each other has created this massive separation consciousness of trauma, being separated from source. So what happens is a narcissist comes along in your life pretending to be your God, your salvation, and you fall for it hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, yeah. It's I'm so glad again we're having this conversation, because I think especially with the number of in my listening audience that are under age 40, especially under age 30, their
Wow.
minds are just so influenced by trying to find out who they are, and especially around the subject of legacy, because legacy is almost this concept or this idea of like, I'm going to go out there and make something of myself. And so I think a part of that is the achievement. And especially if we talk about affluent communities, there's a part of that that has to do with reputation. But if a narcissist comes along and sideswipes that reputation, I think
Yeah,
it's important to back the train up and to look at that inner landscape and to realize there is hope. And so I'm going to transition it right now to
there
what are some of
is.
the best steps?
Okay. Well, the first thing you have to do is realize that you can't make a crocodile play ball or walk on a leash with you. So the more, and you're addicted, you are literally suffering a physiological peptide addiction to this person that is as bad as any substance. So you're trying to get relief from them, you're trying to get dopamine from them, and you're getting cortisol and you are massively addicted. You have to detach. You have to stop. You have to pull away. And that is so, so important. When you pull away, you're going to go through aftershock, which is a pretty scary thing. You've been in a fight, you've been highly adrenalized a lot of the time. So you're in fight, flee, fawn, usually fight and flee. And then when you get away, what happens is what happened last week, last month, last year will all hit you like a freight train because you're stationary, because you're on your own, and now it's all going to come up. And this is when people think they're losing their mind. You're going to be in rumination and obsession. You're barely going to be able to function. You will have CPTSD. You'll have agoraphobia. You'll have fibromyalgia. You'll have adrenal rushes. You will be triggered by everything and anyone. And you will think that you are literally losing your soul and your mind. You will feel like the narcissist is under your skin, walking around throughout you everywhere like a disgusting psychic takeover disease, like a black ink. You will feel like you are psychically being sucked, and you are. You don't have to have physical contact with a narcissist, literally, for them to still be sucking on your energy field like a psychic vampire, because they are. So a lot of people break no contact because the trauma in aftershock is so great they can't bear it. Or what they end up doing is picking up an addiction to try to numb out the pain. So they could get into drugs or alcohol or food, or trying to get sex with somebody else. Or they might try to medicate to numb out. Now, of course, if you need medication short term just for your own safety, that makes sense. But none of those things are the long term solution, and they're actually no solution, because you'll end up more damaged and have an even harder comeback. If you go back to the narcissist at that point, if the narcissist might love bomb you to get you back, or you may hand over more of your rights to get back with them, or convince yourself that if you just change or try this, it could be different, whatever. The narcissist will line you up for even greater abuse, because their pathological malignant self is, how dare you leave? You are going to be punished horrifically for this. So they're going to set you up purposefully as revenge for an even bigger fall. So the more times you get out and go back in, the worse shape you're going to be in. Plus, the narcissist will manipulate you for you to hand over more of the goodies, let them in on contracts or legal things or get money out of your bank accounts, or this is just what they do, especially when the ship's going down. They are loading up their lifeboat as high as they can get it, and they'll do anything. They'll light fires over there so you're not looking,
Oh, sure.
right?
It's warfare at its finest. So some of the some of the best steps we could say is number one, no contact, to
Yeah.
break away and to stay
Yes.
consistent with that. Number two,
Yes.
to look at any inner wounds that need healing. What could be a third? And I'm just kind of going
Yes.
back into a recap.
We definitely need to go to those inner wounds. Absolutely. So it's called self-partnering. Rather than your focus out there, which means you have no internal power and no connection to source for your power. If you turn inwards and start doing that inner work on those wounds, and all it is, what it is everything that's triggering off for you. Now, we've been conditioned to think it's all in our head. It's actually in our body. It's in our somatic, limbic, emotional self. And that's why with the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Program, as you know, because you've worked with it, you get underneath the thinking level into your body to do the healing there. And then the mind shifts to reflect that. So the mind settles down. So you get your sanity, your soul, and your life force back. And the other thing is, too, which I was alluding to, know thy enemy. Do not trust that creature 1 centimeter. Do not think that they behave in life like you do. They don't even think like you do. They don't even want what you do. So you have to, when you leave, you do no contact, you get really smart. You secure off everything that they've got access to. You change your passwords if they could sabotage you, because that person will sabotage you. They will go for any loose end. So you have to be smart. And when you learn this stuff, the people that are prepared, often we have people in our community, they start doing the inner work and get support even before they leave. They start researching how to leave, and they realize there is no point going to a crocodile to try to get a kiss anymore. I'm not even going to expect or try to make this person be decent, because they just don't even have the capacity, especially now. Once you're in devalue and discard and those cycles, you have become the enemy, right? There's no getting back in the good books.
Yeah.
You are now in a battle for your soul. You're in a spiritual battle.
That's what I was going to bring up. It's almost like I was going to say a battle for someone's soul, because either they
It
make it
is.
through to the other side, or the other party, the narcissist, because they've gone to the
Yeah,
dark side like Darth Vader. It's like they will
absolutely.
get your soul, and if you give them an inch, they'll take a
Yep.
mile and they'll take you down. And the more
Yep.
sophisticated they are,
Yep.
whoo, and I think
Oh,
this is
that's right. And
one
they
of the
have to, because here it is. The narcissist is the false self. They need to walk away from this relationship with you demented, crumpled into a heap, so that they can say, look at this nutcase. They were the problem and I was the good one. They have to destroy you.
Well, I think one of the things that happens that you're pointing to is the naivety of the person changes, because I think sometimes when we talk about, again, like the last so many decades, when I mean, I was raised in the 80s, and it was like
Yeah.
movies that were, they had the happy ending of the Disney at the end, and unless somebody was exposed, let's say, to nature where there were like wolves and wolverines, it's almost like this concept of the predator doesn't become real until they're face to face with it, and they're learning on the job. And
Yeah.
that is what a way
Yeah.
to learn.
Yeah, yeah. And once somebody's had the capacity to maliciously attack you, throw you under the bus, pathologically lie, go after your stuff without conscience, and you will have seen all of this. Once somebody's crossed the line to that level, you are not a flesh and blood soul human to them.
You're a
You will beat
target.
out the people, but you're not to them.
Yeah.
You are a mere object and they have zero conscience and empathy. And you need to know what you're dealing with, because somebody like that cannot, does not, will not change. And it's going to get worse. But the good news is if you get prepared and you do the inner work and you get the support, which is exactly, what our community does on a really big global scale, you will defeat them easily. Narcissists are actually very easy to defeat, and we defeat them all the time in our community.
But somebody has to have that mindset shift and not go back where they've got those, what I might call like the holes in their rowboat, where the narcissist can then put their hooks in and go, ha ha, I tricked you again. That was the best entrapment that I've come up with in the latest version. So it's almost like coming face to face with your weaknesses. But again, if somebody's been an academic, an intellectual, this is brand new work, and they're going, wow, I've never done this before.
And they're the ones that are the most susceptible, because they think I'm intelligent enough, I can cope. And also, too, the academic and the intellectual, which I was as well, which is, well, I need to be good enough. I need to earn approval. I need to make this right. I need to succeed. Otherwise, I'm not lovable and acceptable. So we will not admit defeat until we're nearly destroyed.
Yeah. And I think one of the simple things, when you had mentioned a moment ago, it is so simple. I think one of those distinctions is saying my vote counts, my self-confidence counts, my ability to self-partner counts, and I don't have to discount that. Because again, if somebody grew up and it was based on their performance and their ability to get approval from the community and the teachers and the
Yes.
principals and the school, and it's so much performance based, that all of a sudden has to shift, and it's like a brand new belief system of my vote counts and my vote is enough. And that could be like a game changer for many people.
Massively. The big spiritual lesson in this is that we have been trained and programmed out of putting our soul first. And what is our soul? Our emotions, our wholeness, our value for just existing for who we are. We put everything in front of that. Everything. We were especially connected to how other people saw us to get our value and our worth, rather than knowing we were good with God. And I'm not talking that, yeah. And our only true value and source is being good with God, being good with source, being good with creator. That's the only way you ever feel love. We were
And that
looking
is,
for love in all the wrong places. We're looking for acceptance and identity in all the wrong places. And that's what made us susceptible to this.
yeah. And
When everything breaks in your life, because a narcissist is like a wrecking ball, they wreck everything. But it's cool. It was for me. I'm going to speak from mine and many other people, because we lost everything that we thought was us, and we were left with my soul comes first. So when I turned inwards to heal and recover my soul and make it right between myself, my inner child, and my creator, and created that holy trinity as a healed oneness, I came back from nothing twice. I lost everything at 40. I'd been a really successful woman. I lost everything, piles of debt, lost it all again at 46. Same deal. And now I'm 57 nearly, and I have more wealth and expansion and joy and mission and purpose than I could have ever imagined in my wildest dreams. Because when I put my soul first and I got that relationship right and felt the beauty and the joy and the oneness and the love without anything, with nothing, just that. And then I created from there. I had the dream team on my side. My soul and source started providing the opportunity, synchronicity, and miracle, because I had self-partnered myself. It gave me more of who I became to my soul, more partnership, more unity consciousness. From there, everything works. This is the big thing.
yeah, I think it's just brilliant that you spoke into that, because also these days, women who are coming out of divorce and having to start all over again,
Oh,
it,
gosh,
and
yes.
yeah, and that's like a very real and current conversation these days, because they're at a fork in the road in terms of understanding what is my new identity. Also, if whether they got a fair deal, that's great. If they got the short straw, that's another story. But again, it's a lot. Oftentimes, they will say to themselves something along the lines of like, well, I built up everything to this point, and now I got to start over again. And I think what you just spoke into can give one of those ladies or men out there that has gone through a divorce recently, that hope that, maybe that they can rebuild and rebuild better.
One of the most beautiful stories in our community, a lady who did the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Program, her name was Dot. She was in her late 70s, four narcissistic relationships in a row, three of them they'd married. She'd lost all her kids and grandkids in alienation from one of those. She had the narcissistic husband in her late 70s who was treating her horrifically. She'd grown up with a narcissistic father. Anyway, her friend told her about NAP. She could barely even turn on a computer, let alone her friend helped her like download onto her phone and to healing. She ended up letting go of trauma, left her husband, got the courage, got a solicitor. She initiated proceedings, stood in her truth. He crumbled to bits, as they do, because they're the little man behind the curtain pretending to be omnipotent when they're actually powerless little creatures feeding off your fear. He fell to bits. He acquiesced. She got an amazing settlement. She ended up going into this gorgeous little retirement village where she had her own place. She was healing, healing, healing. She started enjoying friendships and doing things that he would never let her do. None of them had let her done anything. She'd been there just to serve every single one of the four of them. So she came into this freedom with Source to be herself. She met a guy in the retirement village 10 years younger than her who was just amazing, fell in love with him. He had a fair bit of money. They started traveling the world together. She was writing a book. I don't know if she's finished it. She started to learn piano in her late 70s. And she had the wounds of missing out on her son and all of his family for 34 years because of alienation from a narcissistic husband. So she got to letting go of the traumas of that and bringing in Source, and she came to peace and wholeness. Then out of the blue, that son found her and made contact, and she got reunited with that whole family and her grandkids. This is what happens when the wounds go and Source steps in and partners you. That's what happens. Miracle.
So I almost wonder, and this again, I'm going to go esoteric for a moment. I almost wonder if it's like somebody's changing their frequency or their vibration, thus being able to attract better things. But a lot of times we don't think in terms of frequency and vibration.
Because you can't. Because the way that we think too is always going to be within the bandwidth of the somatic emotional limbic self. So if we've got trauma, wounds, and old programs in there, you can only think within that bandwidth. It's not until you've actually released those programs and traumas, which is the false self. You have to move the false self out. What hurts? And a process that will do that, which is what quantum freedom healing does. And then you bring in the light, and it's a very simple visualization that you follow and you just do. And it's so ridiculously simple. People think it's too simple. But then when you do that, God steps in and all things are possible with God. And
You
what
mean God's
happens
more
is
powerful? I'm sorry, go ahead.
absolutely. Well, you now have the infinite consciousness, which has unlimited access to the multi permutations in the field in all space, time, and dimension. Your logical mind has control of 40 bits per second. Your super conscious, subconscious in concert is 40 billion bits per second of an unlimited quantum field. And when it's just space and peace, all things come in over calm waters. That's when the goodies and the blessings arrive in greater abundance than you could ever imagine. The irony is you don't need them to be whole. You just feel whole. And then they come and you feel inspired and you feel like, oh, I'd love to. You start listening. You follow. You're called. It unfolds. Everything you need comes to you.
And that is the brilliance that again, I know people had said to you in your past, like, oh, you can't heal, and you found this way forward to be able to communicate it. And perhaps that is a part of your purpose and a part of your legacy, which we'll get to in a moment. Would
Yeah,
you speak
for sure.
into
Yeah.
transcending from surviving to thriving? And I think this key point is really important because I've heard some narcissistic experts say,
Yeah.
Well, once you go through an experience like that, the narcissist can colonize your mind. But what I'm hearing you say is, no, they don't have to infect you with their evil.
Well, the whole thing is, okay, I just actually did a piece on that I put out on my blog. So you've got your survivor, which is the traditional method. It means you got away from the narcissist, but you're going to have to manage your PTSD, your diminished self, all these losses in your life, and you're always going to be damaged, and the person lives on inside of you. It's just garbage. That doesn't need to happen. This was a soul contract at the highest level. So if we go esoteric, because it's just the truth, it's the 40,000-foot view. Before we all came down, I love what Barbara DeAngelo said. She wrote in one of her books, I can't remember, but she said, before I came down here this time, I sat with my spiritual advisors and they said, well, what do you want to work on? And she said, I would love to have self-love and boundaries to love and respect myself. And they said, fantastic. So somebody put their hand up in spirit, back of the room, and said, I will help you with that, dear soul. And she said, dear soul, would you please come forward? The advisor said, come forward and let's make this contract. And they said, what will be your part in it? And he said, I will come into your life. You will fall so in love with me. I will infiltrate your life and every aspect of it. And I will abuse you and abuse you and abuse you. And I will not stop abusing you till you let go of your dependency on me and come back to your full relationship with yourself and your higher self. And she was so excited as that soul. She said, dearly beloved, she was crying as a soul with joy. Do you give me your word? You will not stop until I come home to myself and source. He said, I promise you I won't. And that's your narcissistic relationship. That is it. Because what happens with all of us, as Pema Chodron once said, something doesn't stop hurting until it's taught us what we need to learn. I know from working with millions of people over the last 17 years that people who do not come home to source in themselves, yes, there is the legacy. It never leaves them. They don't recover. They only do survivor. All of us who do that inner work and come home, we end up far superior, expanded, confident, and magnificent and incredible than even before we were born, literally.
So what key principles do you think this speaks into, from the inside out, from as above,
Yeah,
so below?
both of those, especially from the inside out, because we were all programmed to live life from the outside in.
Mic drop on that one. Yeah.
Disconnected from our power source. And we were all believing life happens to me instead of for me. Because when you get into the thriver principle, if you get triggered and hurt, this is showing you a shadow, an unhealed part where you're not connected to source and your true power. The awesome thing about the narcissist is they find and seek those things out to pretend to heal them and then to bash you, to punish you, to trigger you into reactive abuse, to blame you. So all of the stuff you didn't know you had gets fully activated. If you let go of them and you turn inwards to load that up, let it go and replace it with source, that person just handed you your evolution spiritual soul graduation on a silver plate.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's almost at PhD level.
They were
Well,
the catalyst that gave you back to yourself.
yeah. What's interesting is oftentimes they say, like, before somebody can, kill the man or the woman, they have to assassinate the character first. And so I just find it so interesting that the
Yeah.
narcissist is definitely a catalyst, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So what other principles? And I just want to circle this for a moment, because I think these are some universal principles that no matter somebody's culture or generation,
Got it.
that it can speak to their heart and to their soul.
How do you defeat a narcissist when they're not your reality? Okay, so the narcissist can only operate in your energy field when you are handing them emotional energy, because that actually makes them real. That's like the blood to the vampire. So, the narcissist, what is their one purpose? Is to get the blood like the vampire, to get your emotional energy, good or bad, it makes no difference, because it's the significance. I can affect you so much, it means I exist.
And it's
So
so
we're
it's so
trying to
important.
defeat the narcissist, but when you detach and regain your soul and take it back and evolve beyond it, they actually become not your reality. Like and they don't exist. It's like they don't exist. And people say, well, they will never leave me alone. I'll never be able to co-parent. They're going to be da da da. They're my parents. They're this, they're that. It's just not true. It doesn't even matter if it's your government.
Oh,
When
that's a whole discussion
you
right there. Not that we can have that on YouTube, but that's a whole discussion right there.
Right, we'll just take that word. Well, we didn't say exactly. Right. So what we're saying is that when you get your power and your connection and your light and your courage fearlessly, and that is not your reality, and you're on your framework and not theirs, they cannot touch you. None of it can touch you. You are free and flourished and nourished.
Yeah, and so if I circle back to legacy for a moment, even if somebody can break a pattern, they don't have to
Yeah.
necessarily put their name on the side of a library or a museum. They could just break some family patterns in terms of generational curses, and that could be the defining legacy that changes it 7 generations forward and 7 generations back and so forth.
Massive, massive. And what is legacy anyway? Like really, really the reason that we do anything in our life is so that we feel fulfilled and we feel like we've served our purpose. And I'm sure there are people that maybe have got their names on the side of it, but they never felt it in their gut and their core. But right? So when we connect to source, and when we're source filled and we're source led, everything we do is legacy.
That's the tweetable moment right there. So I want to ask you about the subconscious and superconscious, but I want to go woo woo for a moment before you answer this question. And the woo woo thing
Sure.
that I want to bring up, and not everybody is going to bring or believe in ghosts, but a lot
Sure.
of the times I've heard that ghosts exists because of something called soul fragmentation. So if a living soul on this
Yeah.
planet gets
Yeah.
shocked too many times, whether it's by a narcissist, whether it's being
Mhm.
sideswiped by that car accident, but it's just too much shock, their soul fragments. And so again, I
Mhm.
think that this conversation is also just around remedies so that our soul can come back together. It doesn't have to be like
Yes.
cheesecloth metaphorically with 100 different holes in it or 10 holes or 10,000 holes, um,
Yeah.
compared to being that forgotten fragmented soul. What say you on
It's
that? I
very
know that's a little deep.
true. It's very, very true. It's the normal way that we know about is disassociation. And that happens massively with a narcissist. Like when you drive somewhere and you arrive and you think, I can't even remember the streets I took, right? Or you're talking to somebody and you're not even there. You're not in your body. That's disassociation. So that means you've soul fragmented out because you've had that much trauma you've broken. But what happens, and what is so gorgeous, is all of this dis-ease, all of these broken parts of yourself that are fragmented, when the trauma comes out and the light comes in, everything comes back together and actually activates back to health. So your CPTSD is disassociation fragmentation. So what happens is your PTSD will actually melt away. So does the agoraphobia. So does all of it, the fibromyalgia there. And the more that you come back together and the light comes in, you start making light-filled, source-filled choices. You eat better food. You do healthier things. You hang out with healthier people. Like things don't resonate with you anymore. It's like people stuck in victim consciousness. It's just not your bag anymore. I just don't want to be around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know one of the things you speak into as a part of your meditations is reaching into like the subconscious and the superconscious mind. So it's not necessarily
Absolutely.
staying within the logical, but asking the question of, is there a message that a higher source would like to share with me? Or is there something I need to know to open up my ears and listen? And maybe it's not from a textbook or something, within this world.
Gosh, and here this is so big with narcissistic abuse because most of us, including me, we approached it like we would of everything from a logical standpoint. And we tried to understand about them and we tried to find out information about them, something that would give us peace and strength and courage and healing. But, let's imagine that you got hit by a car, you're bleeding out on the road. Somebody standing next to you runs after the driver and researches them. And why did they do a hit and run and leave you bleeding on the road? Well, you're going to die. So how ridiculous is it? Part of our programming, let's get hit by the narcissistic bus and we're going to leave ourselves bleeding and shit and everything there is about a narcissist and run after them with the knowledge and the information. That doesn't heal you. It's like Pema Chodron said, if somebody shoots an arrow into your heart, it's pretty stupid yelling at them. Get the arrow out of your heart. So we have to turn within, and we can't control or fix or change anybody anyway, and it's never going to heal us. We can only heal ourselves. So, and where the victim consciousness has been set up, because somebody traumatized me, well, therefore it's their responsibility and it's got nothing to do with me. Thriver consciousness is, it's not my fault I got traumatized, but now it's in my body. It is my responsibility because it's my body.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Somebody has to want to heal, but if somebody, when you're referring to the narcissistic abuse, it's like they've deposited into the cells in your body, and now all of a sudden it's your bag, and you got to do the work to get it out. And if you don't do the work, it could take you down.
There's an actually deeper reality going back to the Barbara DeAngelis story. This was a wound that you'd already brought in from past lifetimes in your childhood that was lying dormant that made you susceptible, not to blame, but susceptible. And the narcissist targeted and fully activated it. And if the narcissist hadn't come along and activated, you would have needed another catalyst to come and bring it up for you to set yourself free and live beyond it. It was always meant to be.
Dear God, I would like to no longer have any persecution programming in prior lives. Thank you.
And that's
And
exactly what we've turned inwards to. I had massive persecution problems. Now I don't get persecuted at all. And if anybody tries it, I just stand up and I have no fear and they crumble to dust. In the past, because of my persecution traumas, it would become a white hot mess and I'd get ripped to pieces and my life was getting destroyed over and over again. But now it's no longer in my body. I graduated and I have no fear of it. And it took about a couple of times, people having a go, and I just rose beautifully, snapped it off, bang, bingo, I'm done. You don't matter. I'm great. Nothing happened because I healed it.
yeah, yeah. So I'm going to go woo-woo and deep again. So do you think that if it's not linear, we could be
And
living,
it's not.
okay, we could be living parallel lives. And
We are.
and if we heal one, that could have a
Yeah.
ripple effect energetically. Would you?
Massively, and it always does.
Okay.
So, time is a spindle, which is vertical. So everything's only happening in the moment of now. And it's like, well, people say, well, I'm going to start doing my healings tomorrow. And I'm like, well, tomorrow never comes. Like this only now. You could say tomorrow, I'm going to start tomorrow. Like there's only now. So when we access our quantum body, which is our multidimensional, interdimensional, future parallel lifetimes, past life self, we have to access all of that in a healing, because if we just try and heal now and don't access those multidimensional selves, it's like trying to take out a cancer, but all the stem cells are still there. So it will just reignite.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what's so interesting is many times people, they might not think to consider the subconscious or the superconscious, but it
It's
seems like
everything.
right? The conscious mind sometimes wants to be stubborn. And I don't know if that's the peptide addiction of being trauma bonded, or if it's just, well, I need it to make sense of my logical mind because that's what society runs on. And so speak into that, if you would, for a moment, of why some people can be so stubborn that they have to get hit, by the narcissism bus, twice or three times, or it's like,
Yes.
oh, here we go
Put up my
again. Or
head. That was
right.
me. Exactly. Okay, so the conscious mind, again, our programming, our inverted programming is telling us that our logical mind is us. Our logical mind is not us. Our logical mind is just simply a tool that we use to think about things. It's not us. Who we are is our somatic, limbic, emotional self. That's our connection to source. That's who we are. And if you think of your subconscious, or every single one of our subconscious runs trillions of programs by itself to make us be a human, a spirit, and a flesh suit. Your logical mind how to run your endocrine system or anything else. So we have to get very now the logical mind is the ego. That is the I am my mind. No, you're not. Your mind is going to think within the bandwidth of your emotional somatic programming. 9 people could watch one event and everyone will tell you a completely different story about it. That is their reality based on who they're being. Okay. You can't think yourself out of who you're being because your thinking is only following your being. The mind follows the body. If we've got flashcards up against somebody and they're looking at scenes, your heart, body, frequency will emotionally send the sensors off before your mind even picks it up. And the mind follows what the body did. Most people don't know this. So we think that we're trying to think our way out of being. No amount of thinking or doing changes your beingness. Changing your beingness changes your beingness. You've got to get inside in theta brainwave. You cannot heal what you're not prepared to feel. And if you have a quantum process and you cannot change yourself if you cannot be humble and real enough to self-partner with love and devotion and super presence to hold it, be with it, and let it go. Our whole life, the success is about letting go of who we're not, which what hurts. That's we're not what hurts. And bringing in the light to replace it. And what happens is we're not actually learning anything. When source comes in, you have all knowing, all information, miracle, synchronicity to come to you to grant you more of you. We know our boundaries, our self-love, our self-respect. We know communion. We know unity consciousness when the light comes in because we're already coded with it. We already have it. We already are it. We're made in the likeness and the image of source God creation anyway, which is oneness, unity consciousness. The dumb thing is we've been taught, be on your wounds, chopped off in separation consciousness in the dark, no access to that information. And let's try and put ice cream on top of poop. Let's try and get learning on top of a beingness that's defunct. And it keeps slipping and sliding off and we're stuck with crap. And that's been the programming.
Yeah. And this is why I think that this conversation around remedies is really important, because prior generations were sometimes told to stuff their emotions. And we might be the first in our family, right, that could come forward and say, I'd like to do a different way than maybe what was modeled, or I'd like to do a different way because I don't want to be toxic by the time I'm 60 or 70 or 80, which is what happens many times when somebody just stuffs in and numbs out or escapes their emotion. Not only are they numbing out, not just one part of themselves, but many different parts of themselves, but then they reach an older age and that toxicity is like cumulative. And whew.
It's self-abuse. It's self-abuse, traumatization, and it's PTSD. So if you imagine like a 5-year-old, your child coming up and saying, Mom, Dad, and you said, shut up, go away. I want this cheese sandwich. I'm watching TV. I'm going to have a cigarette, a drink. I'm going to run and have sex with somebody. Go away. I don't want to listen to you.
Or have a
That
stiff upper
5
lip. Go ahead.
This is what, yes. So that's our inner child. That's that unhealed, vulnerable, broken part of ourselves. We're telling it to shut up and we're using outer things to just distract ourselves from it. If we were to do that literally to a child, it would either explode into psychotic anxiety because it's not being heard, or it would crumple up in the corner into a catatonic depression because what's the point? So, this is what we do to ourselves constantly because we don't turn inwards to hold this child, to say, I'm validating you. I'm not going to talk you out of it. I'm going to fully feel it. You can't heal what you're not prepared to feel. I'm going to be with you and allow you to be validated and held and heard. And then, gorgeous, dear child, I'm going to release that trauma from you and fill you with light. And when we do that to our own inner being, we heal up into unity consciousness instead of sending ourselves into complicated post traumatic stress disorder, which is how every human being is living who's not doing that. And then trying to outsource accomplishments and titles and achievements, try to stop the gap, which never works. It's like putting sandwiches on your jumper and thinking you've had lunch.
Yeah, and I just find this conversation just so important again, and fascinating because especially when there's this idea of generational trauma. So if our parents or our grandparents, we're talking about World War One and Two and everything before that, and just over time and every three generations and all of those plans, those long-term plans, and then it's almost like then the child is born and they grow up and they're supposed to not just fill their void, but they're supposed to fill the void of their parents and to their grandparents because those
100%.
individuals haven't done the work. And sometimes this comes up in family businesses or
Big time.
families of multi-generational
I
families of,
bet.
yeah, multi-generational families of wealth. And now
Yes.
the next gen is coming up and they're going, wow, it's not just my jigsaw puzzle. I get 1,000 pieces in my jigsaw puzzle. And oh,
And there's epigenetic, genetic, inherited trauma. 100%. So we don't just inherit eye color, skin color. We also get our ancestors' emotional predispositions. So they've done the studies, and also too in our healing matrix and quantum freedom healing, a big aspect of that is clearing the generational inherited trauma that you've taken on. But what's really cool, because we are all one in a oneness unity consciousness, when you're healing for yourself, you're also healing for your family. You're also clearing their wounds as well as the collective wounds at the same time.
so congratulations, you get to be the brave one.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. Where you lead the way. Well, we chose that. That's what we wanted to do. That's why we do what we do. And
Yeah.
a lot of people who have narcissistically been abused are star seeds, light bearers. So many of them know that they're here to make a difference and to bring the light into the darkness. And what more powerful way than to be fully submerged into that dark cavern of narcissistic abuse? And you ain't going to get out of it without a light. And when you ignite that light and you get out of it, you are now a light that takes other people out of the darkness and into the light.
Yeah.
There's a
Take that.
reason for this.
Yeah, with the lightsaber.
There's a reason. Yeah. And a lot of people get told, by psychologists and all this, abuse forums, oh, this was just bad luck that happened to you. No, it wasn't. There was a purpose for this. There's a
Yeah.
reason. And it's an amazing reason if you can grab it and heal and ascend. You could not give me, Angelina, $20 trillion to go back to life before I was narcissistically abused. And I was told I would never recover, and I nearly died. I nearly died.
Which is why I think this conversation is important because when you were told messages that were negative, it's similar to when a doctor tells a patient, okay, well, this is the
Yeah.
end of your life. And that person
Yeah,
buys into that belief in the mind body connection
absolutely.
and they make it a reality. So I thought, you know what, if Melanie
Of
could speak
course.
into this idea of not just surviving these days as inflation goes up and stress goes up and all of the different, what I call a polycrisis in the world these days,
Oh, yeah,
then
they're
it
massive.
can provide a new idea, a new reality tunnel for someone that they know that there
Mhm.
can be the possibility that they can thrive and design a legacy and not give up and not throw in the towel. Because in the last few decades, I've just been shocked by the number of people that will throw in the towel
Mm.
and that's it. And they just give up. no matter whether their
Mm,
age is whatever their age is.
yep. That's right. And they go into a comfort zone, and comfort zones are never comfortable because you're going against the calling of your soul and your expansion, which is actually who you are. So that's never going to work out well for them anyway, you know.
Yes.
Yeah. And this really is about this is why the narcissism conversation is so important. We are literally going from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. And we're right in a massive change right now that happens, every 260 odd thousand years, and we've got 4 cycles simultaneously happening at once. And so what was the age of Pisces? It was about the age of separation. It was about an outer God. I am separated from, power over, and I have to earn love and approval, which is the codependent narcissistic relationship. Now, what we're moving into is the age of Aquarius, which is co creative consciousness. Source and I am one, and I am made in the image and the likeness, and I am a powerful creator through me into the hologram of my experience, sourcing through source, my higher self, my unlimited self. So what does that mean? It means the outside is only a hologram, as it always has been, of more of who you're being. We can take our power back. This is also the time for heaven on earth. This is also the time for when narcissism and the darkness and the shadows is all being flushed out to the light, to be cleansed and released. And enough people are standing into their light and their power with source that they now are no longer acquiescing to tyranny. And they're saying, like in The Wizard of Oz, you really are a person pulling the levers, pretending to be a god, and you're not. And me and source are the true power, and you don't have any, which means that we're going to be free to have heaven on earth. This is the end of narcissism. But we have got to stop lowering we've got to work to get our vibration beyond the victim, beyond the broken victim, in dependencies, acquiescing to tyranny, or forever holding on to the trauma, which then reduces us down to be cannon fodder.
And that is brilliant right there, because I think oftentimes, and I know we haven't had this conversation before, many times I've thought that humanity is, this is my metaphor, is born into, like a broken wheelchair with deflated wheels. And then
Yep.
someone's laughing at us going, well, why can't you win the race, you dumb
Yeah.
human? And then it's
Yeah.
like, so we've got to like learn it all. Okay. So let me ask my next question so I don't go off
We've
on a
got to
tangent.
wake up. We've got to wake up. And there's no better way to wake up than be hit by a narcissist, because you've got to then awaken to get out of it.
Yeah. Or 10.
Well, as many as it needs, and as many lifetimes as it needs.
Yeah. Dear God,
But
I'm going to
this
get it.
one is a very powerful one where we can. And I love that.
That's great, because my email is, dear God, can we wrap it up in this lifetime? I don't want to have more.
And it's now we've got the greatest opportunity. This is the most exciting time to be alive. There is more. And in my healings, because I'm always bringing in the light, like I did it for a big group this morning on a Zoom, the light is getting more powerful and brighter and brighter and brighter. And as an intuitive light healer, it's blowing me away how powerful it is. It's already available to access. If we just get the darkness out of the way and bring it in, we've got more than we've ever had, ever. And it's increasing every week.
Beautiful. So when we get to release and no longer hold on to what isn't our own, how do you think that
Yes.
influences the legacy we could design and develop?
Love it. That gives space for the inspiration and the guidance and the next steps to enter our consciousness, our being. And we're in partnership with our subconscious and our superconscious. We didn't explain that before. Okay, so what normally happens is we've got an unconscious subconscious. In other words, we don't know what's going on inside of ourselves. And consciously, we're trying to address that and fix that and fight with our outer world. But what happens is our superconscious is always saying to us, I love and adore you so much. I'm going to give you plenty of who you're being. I agree with you. I love you. I adore you. I serve you. The superconscious God says, okay, if you're being depressed, dear soul, I adore you. I'll give you more situations to be depressed about. Dear soul, I love you so much that if you go to peace and wholeness and an expansive feeling inside, I'm going to grant you more to give you peace and wholeness and expansive feeling on the inside. So I'm going to give you more of who you're being. It's a very, very simple system. So, but nobody taught us this. So what happened is we had a really messed up subconscious because of our traumas. Consciously, we're trying to think our way out of them or fix something out there, whereas our mind can only follow in the bandwidth of the consciousness. So we're going to think in traumatized ways. We're going to make choices that give us more trauma. We're going to pick people who are going to traumatize us. We're going to show up and co-collude with more trauma. So the only thing we ever have to do, the only thing to get the Holy Trinity is to go inside, let go of the trauma, bring God in, the light. Our subconscious sets to a God expansive, peaceful, whole, loved consciousness. And then we have all of this beautiful space like this, where infinity is. And then we're just granted more. We get the synchronicity, the miracle, the clue, the support. And then we have to keep going. It's not like you do it once and that's it. But you're going to have things come up that are not you. And then you've got a fear of receiving, and then you've got a fear of deservedness. And then you get tempted into an old program, and you have to stay awake and sober. All you got to do is listen to your triggers and go, okay, there's something there that shouldn't be. I'm going to do another healing. I don't even need to know what it is. I'll get rid of that funky feeling. I'll bring in more source, and I keep on that. And I just unfold into divine inspiration, wisdom, synchronicity, and miracle. That's actually it.
Well, this is the education bit that I think, again, was left out in school growing up, whether it was public or private school. This idea of like, well, to claim personal agency, we also get to claim personal agency over our subconscious, our triggers, our superconscious. So let me move on to the next question, which is, we live in a society that fears death, and it is often said that grief is held in the lungs. So do you think conversations around legacy could come to the forefront of public consciousness in claiming one's personal agency if we had the tools to not just be led by fear?
Oh my gosh, so much. And until you transcend the fear of dying, you never truly live. Because we have so many survival programs, and a lot of them are from past lives and the zeitgeist of the human traumatized consciousness. If I do this, I'm going to die. If I like bring myself out into the public and I show my true colors, I'm going to be annihilated. If I speak up, if I lay that boundary, I'm going to be thrown out of the hut and I'll starve to death. These are very, very, very real traumas. If I don't have a man, I can't survive. Even women that make millions of dollars lose the no hope of narcissist, and they're in bed shriveled up thinking they're going to die because it's a trauma. Traumas aren't logical. So we have so many survival programs that are the fear of death, which never allow us to live. But once the fear, yes, and then we can't do legacy.
Yeah, that's deep right there. Then we can never really live. And so when I look out many times at society and at people, there are those that are brave enough, courageous enough, they're self-starters, they will design a legacy, no issue there. And then there's others that just stay frozen from trauma on the sidelines.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
But I'm my hope is always that they'll listen to a new conversation and it can plant a seed. So speaking of legacy, how do you define this word, Melanie? And what would you like your holistic legacy to be?
Legacy to me is making a difference, and legacy for me is your dharma. It's being able to connect to the purpose that you chose before you came here, that your soul intended. Because what I've discovered in my life is, in my personality, old Melanie, I had my ideas of how life should go. My soul and experiences kept bringing me back to until I eventually surrendered and I said, divine will, not my will. But then I found out that divine will, because Source and I am one, and Source is my higher self, the best and most incredible part of me. There is no separation. That divine will actually was my will all along and has given me the most incredible, fulfilling life that would only have ever durably fulfilled me.
That is sweet. And what values get to be honored? What core values?
Integrity is huge. Not selling your soul. Courage. Uh, for me, really, the biggest one is not selling your soul. Not being attached to something that's not your truth because of neediness or survival.
That's lovely. That's lovely. Yes. Thank
Which
you.
means freedom, freedom to fully be yourself is the most, and that's because you're on soul mission, because that is yourself.
Yeah. Somebody's not, like a pretzel, like I'll twist it up, like I got to get all those people's approval and
And the interesting thing was, every time we're actually going for other people's approval, the real core emptiness, shame, was we didn't feel approved of by true source because we were
Ooh,
disconnected. That was actually the shame. And
that's
that's
so
actually the core wound shame of a narcissist, and hence why they're so triggered if the false self gets threatened, because they're not connected to source at all.
interesting. What's so fascinating as I draw our conversation to a close is I know at one time you had this idea that you were going to like go to dinner parties, like and have like Martha Stewart dinner parties. But if you had been that version of Melanie, you wouldn't have gone on to reach, millions of people in 15 different countries. I think I have your bio here. Yeah. In terms of, living
That's
this
right.
larger purpose, you would have done what
Exactly.
was socially perhaps impressive with the dinner parties. Yeah,
Mhm.
and yet then missed out on the adventure of a lifetime.
Oh, exactly. And, I thought that by a certain age, I'd be married, I'd have 4 kids, and I'd have all the, what normal people have. And that would have been horrifying.
Yeah, yeah. What's so interesting is I think God was like, Melanie, we have so much more for you.
I would have just felt dead and empty on the inside because that wasn't, so go with it. It's like you got to go down the river and stop trying to fight and then surrender and just let go of what hurts and put your life in source, which is your higher self, your infinite consciousness, because that gives you access to the field in the ways that will nourish and flourish you. Fighting and resistance in your head as a victim cuts you off from all the goodies and just keeps you getting more stuff to get victimized with.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to read my closing paragraph in a moment, but I just wanted, before I do, to say thank you for bringing all of you playing full out and speaking into the remedies of no contact, healing the inner wounds
Mm,
through self partnership, knowing thy
yeah.
enemy, but also in that process knowing yourself so that you can invite more in. And I think when you've spoken to social programming before, we have this idea of what normal is, and yet there could be so
Mm,
much more when we can get through being sideswiped by the narcissist bus, narcissism bus, whether it's once, twice, or how many times, to know that there is something better on the other side if
mm,
we can just get to
much
it
better.
and to trust the process.
Mm,
And even if the narcissist does devalue and discard, who cares next? Like you had said, you grew a
exactly.
skill set and some abilities with thicker skin to not, wait for the approval of that other party. So
Absolutely. And once you start filling with light, you have all the approval and wholeness you need. You never need it from the outside. And then ironically, you get it in spades from genuine sources and non-genuine sources. It's just like, well, that's your stuff. That's not even me. I know who I am.
is there anything else you would like to share, like your website, your latest project, or any other thoughts about legacy?
Wow. Well, yeah, look, definitely if you suspect that you've been with a narcissist or whether you're still with one or whether it was 2 weeks or 2 hours or 20 years ago, doesn't matter. If the trauma's still there, doesn't matter what age you are, and it doesn't matter what you've lost. When you can reset with source, all things are possible. So I'd love you to go to melanietoniaevans.com. All of my resources and stuff is there. And if you're ready to heal and you want to use quantum tools and you want to know people that heal with NARP, often from the first healing, they feel incredible relief. Within weeks, the obsession, the rumination's gone. Within months, you'll be saying narcissist who, and 6 to 18 months, your life is going to be unrecognizable. So it's a completely different trip from contemporary therapy, and you will not just survive, you will thrive better than you could ever believe. Plus, you get to hang out with all of us amazing people and have a community of people that have got we've dealt with it all over the last 17 years, I promise you. Doesn't matter what you're going through. People go, well, nobody's had my situation. Yes, they have. So we can also let you know what's coming up. We know how to read them. They're very stock standard. They all do the same stuff. We can help you prepare. We know what to do. We know how to shift. We know how to set up the whole thing. We do it all the time for people every single day. So I would highly suggest to you the program, which is melanietoniaevans.com/N for Nelly, A for Apple, R for Peter, and you come into our community. We help hold you. Everything is there that you need, and you'll start healing very quickly.
Very cool. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I'm just going to read out my closing paragraph as we draw to a close. So,
Awesome.
okay. In closing, I'm Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person define, develop, and execute their legacy, and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners, there can never be enough education and preparation in the moat or moat around your castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content on this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity. Thank you for joining us today. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please remember to rate and review. Or if you're listening on YouTube, please remember to rate. I'm sorry, let me get this straight. On YouTube, to like and subscribe. So thank you so much for joining today. And we set the intention at the beginning of asking the question of what if you could understand your true power in the context of your legacy. So thank you so for joining us so much. And thank you, Melanie, for speaking into your legacy.
It's my pleasure, Angelina. Thank you for having me.